In 2015, as we ventured deeper into the Utah Valley with the intention of making our way through the mountains to Omalo, based on satellite maps and the visible trails on the Garmin maps, we found ourselves in an almost pristine area of the Caucasian wilderness. This adventure was accompanied by that fantastic sense of exploration, uncertainty and discovery, all tied to effort, attention, focus and openness. The road we were following was hard to even call the road, more of a trail worn by horses rather than vehicles, disappearing first in the dense grasses and then disappearing completely because the river had taken it. Yes, this was definitely an adventure where all of our senses were heightened to the maximum and we found ourselves in the mountains where nature sets the rules. Take a close look at this spot again. Do you see the pattern on the slope to the left created by a landslide? Yes, this is exactly the same place, just 9 years later. I mentioned this at the end of episode 6. It's hard to believe how much this area has changed over the years. When planning this trip, I was prepared for a solitary battle with the terrain that had once defeated me, and yet now I'm driving smoothly on a straight line of grey gravel, effortlessly swallowing the miles. What a disappointment. Almost a decade ago, we had to turn back here. Our Discovery, an overburdened expedition vehicle weighing just over 3.5 tons, had already required a rear left shock absorber replacement, which had failed during this trip. Yet, the vehicle still handled the terrain quite easily. However, traveling solo, I decided not to search for another potentially suitable crossing point. I didn't want to continue driving across meadows where large stones could be hidden in the tall grass, potentially damaging the car's undercarriage. Additionally, I was concerned that I might get stuck in wet terrain, and in those conditions, the winch would be nearly useless. I chose not to risk it and decided to turn back. As it turned out, that was the right decision. A brief conversation with a local whom we unexpectedly encountered reinforced our decision. When asked about the possibility of reaching Omalo from this side, the answer was clear.
Okay.
You can only get there through Zinwali, Shatili and finally through Tusheti. Beyond this point, it's only possible to travel by horseback. Then there was a question about where we're from, which helped explain why we know Russian, and we each went our separate ways. The valley truly captivated me, which is why I decided to return. However, back then, we had to acknowledge the power of nature ruling over this area and we were forced to turn back. Now, thanks to the progress of civilization, I was able to reach a place that opened up a section of the landscape I had not experienced before. But to do so, I needed to obtain permission to stay in this area. When I was stopped by the military patrol at the end of episode 6, I discovered that this was a routine check. I was entering an area where any tourist activity officially ended and I was forced to answer some questions regarding my plans. Once the officers knew my intentions, they informed me that to continue deeper into the valley, I would need a permit, which I could apply for at the checkpoint a few kilometers away. I was glad to learn that it was possible and upon arriving, I went to take care of the formalities. For obvious reasons, I did not record my stay in the military area.
Okay, now, as I finally have the paper that allows me to stay in the valley for the next 2 days, I can move on. Hopefully, it will be worth the wait. It took me around, well, not that bad, a little bit more than an hour, so at least I am secure in case of approach of any soldiers or any other person that would like to check me.
While I waited for the formalities to be completed, I had some thoughts about the current situation. Undoubtedly, the increased controls were a result of Putin's aggressive actions towards neighboring countries, which forced border countries to keep their service on high alert. For us overlanders, this means having to answer questions that seem simple on the surface, but how do you precisely describe the route you're planning to take when you have no idea what's waiting around the next corner? This mandatory check-in and check-out system makes it impossible to remain anonymous. That sense of freedom and anonymous exploration fades away because during that hour of waiting, I felt as if I was being checked in every possible database. I had the feeling that I was playing an adventurer under the watchful eye of Big Brother. Luckily, the air I entered quickly allowed me to forget about the civilization weight on my shoulder. As the environment again became pristine wild, I passed a small shepherd's enclosure, leaving it behind, and was able to focus entirely on the surrounding nature. When I was pleased to see that civilization hadn't reached this spot and that the terrain now reminded me of what I had experienced almost a decade ago, I continued to drive along the riverbed of Utah. But as I approached, I noticed a snowcap resting on the valley floor. I knew that crossing it would require significant effort, so I decided to check whether it was worth the trouble. My feelings were mixed. I decided to try driving up the snow mound, and if I managed to do so without significant problems, I would continue. If not, I would turn back. As expected, I had no traction. My mud terrain tires with the large smooth thread blocks made it nearly impossible to get any grip on the packed snow. I tried to gain a little momentum, but honestly, I was doing so half-heartedly because I had a feeling that it wasn't going to make much sense. As you'll soon see, behind this mound of snow was another, and then yet another. Fighting for the sake of fighting seemed pointless, especially since I was limited by time. And so, this seemingly innocent obstacle, when carefully analyzed, turned out to be the element that ended my exploration of this place by car. With no real option left, I decided to stay at this spot for the night. My feelings were mixed, primarily because I hadn't even moved far enough to lose sight of the checkpoint. Big Brother was still watching, but honestly, it seemed like the only reasonable decision. I had registered my stay here for 2 days and planned to rest, not spend the time battling with the terrain. And that snow, which appeared every few dozen meters, was a guaranteed fight. A tough one. In these conditions, the winch would be useless and there was no way around it. From the drone, the slopes on the right side didn't look steep, and one might think they could be traversed by car, but trust me, they wouldn't. That small black dot in front of the snowcap is Prowler. Just to give you a sense of scale, the valley floor is about 2,300 meters above sea level, and the closest peaks on either side rise to 2,800 meters at their lowest point. Farther down to the right, they already exceed 3,000 meters. Those Har ridges in the back are the border with Russia, with elevations of around 3,500 to 3,600 meters. Being in such a place, the thought that I came here to explore while simultaneously being bound by the set time frame seemed absurd. This kind of pressure doesn't help when it comes to opening up to challenges. The thought of trying to go deeper was very tempting. Mountain Roshkoroki, which closed off the valley from the east, seemed to beckon me, but the guardians in the form of snowdrifts were blocking access to this pristine valley. Thankfully, the inability to explore on wheels doesn't mean that the valley will remain an unknown for me. And since I managed to reach this spot, I decided to check on foot whether it was truly impossible to drive farther as the Georgian I met 9 years ago had suggested. So I went for a walk.
After days sitting down, not moving much in terms of walking. Just one exception, a short walk to the waterfall. I decided to move a bit. Yeah, it's even something positive in the negative. So the negative thing is I couldn't cross this snow patch. Of course, I could try harder use my boards and fight a bit. But the question is, what for? Then I would have to do the same thing on my way back. There's no trees around, so I wouldn't be able to use my winch. It's just effort for nothing, so I decided to stay where I am. I will walk a bit and then I will dive into the cold waters. Those are those kinds of trails that can be mistaken when seen on the Google Earth maps. I do it very often when there's no road on the Garmin map and the Garmin exploration site. I try to look on the Google Earth maps if there are any trails visible, and I think that, looking from the top, it looks like a car trail, like two tires on two sides, but it clearly looks like the trail that had been done by the two people walking side by side. So just it looked similar, but it's another car path. Nothing was driving here, so even if there was no first or second snow patch, it would be really pointless to push farther with the car. I mean, it could be doable, but hey, for what? Yeah, the sad thing is, I just thought to myself that if you're looking for solitude, you need to drive as far as you can and then walk a bit. Then there's a huge chance you will meet nobody for a long time. So I'll continue a bit. Okay, so at least I reached the point where driving a car would be definitely impossible, at least overlanding car. So I have finally proved myself that doing this way is not possible. On the map you can see I have marked a trail and gave it a name like Potential Road. It was based on the Google Maps, but as you can see, it's impossible to get here by car. It's around 2 kilometers from the car, from my car when I parked. It's 2,500 meters of elevation, not from the car, just about the sea level. So yeah, it's a nice valley. Looks like it must be a pleasant walk, but yeah, definitely not doable by car. So I can come back. 40 kilometers of walking. It's a nice activity after spending many days in the car. So it's a good end of the day. Perfect end will be the bath in the cold stream. Hopefully I will find a place where the current is so strong.
Well, forgive the sound quality in the previous part, but since I didn't speak much to the camera, I didn't quite realize how much the river's noise would overpower my voice. It turns out that a fast-moving mountain stream can reach a volume of around 80 decibels, which is similar to the noise from heavy traffic, so it's no surprise I was barely audible. Being there, I definitely didn't find it bothersome, and the walk brought me so much positive energy. The altitude at which I was trekking definitely played a role in the way of talking as well. Over 2,500 meters above sea level and over 200 meters of elevation in just 2 kilometers from the car. For a city dweller who had also been smoking on this trip, it was quite a challenge. The stream I planned to dip into flowed beneath patches of snow. Looking at it, I expected a very refreshing bath since the water flowing from the glacier had little chance to warm up, so it was probably just a couple of degrees above freezing. However, I felt an irresistible urge to immerse myself, so all that remained was to find a spot deep enough to squat and where the current wouldn't be too strong to keep me afloat. Not such simple criteria to meet in this stream. Since I was also shooting 3D footage for a more immersive experience for those who enjoy watching videos in VR headsets, after returning from the walk I set up my gear. For this format, I used the Canon R5C, which records in 8K and requires external power, so every time I had to plug in a power bank to the setup, and this preparation process always took a few minutes. The weather for these activities seemed perfect. The setting sun, still warm, created long shadows that enhanced the contrast of the surrounding landscape. The warm stones further added to the thermal comfort, and I couldn't wait to feel the icy cold water on my skin. So, as soon as I had everything set up, I plunged into the revitalizing cold waters. Believe me, it wasn't easy to stay in there. The stream was relatively shallow, so to submerge fully, I had to lie down, which wasn't easy due to the strong current. I found a little pool where I could brace myself by pushing against rocks in front of me. And that's where I fully immersed myself in the refreshing pleasure of cooling down. And this is my morning. How different from the usual ones when most of us, upon waking up, grab our phones to immediately dive into the whirlwind of tasks and ticking off items from the day's to-do list. And here, peace, no rush. Senses open to the rhythm dictated by nature. Gratitude. Well, maybe a slight momentary irritation of the treatment of animals with a whip, but I also take this as part of experiencing this place. Undoubtedly, this scene, combined with catching the first warm sunbeams, charged me with incredible energy for the rest of the day. Sitting at the tent window, I felt deeply grateful for the opportunity to reach such places and experience them in a way that is inaccessible to many. Here, everything is real. Nothing is done for tourists. This is a snapshot of life that has been unfolding in these lands for centuries. And if it weren't for the black and the yellow aluminum table in front of me, obviously smelling quite appetizing, I might have thought I traveled back in time. Can you imagine a more beautiful start to the day? After a leisurely morning spent relaxing and admiring nature, it was time to hit the road again. I could legally stay here for one more day as my permit was for 2 days, but since I couldn't venture deeper into the valley by car, I decided to move on and use this additional day somewhere else. The return journey followed exactly the same path I took to get here, so I knew what to expect, and almost everything was familiar. All that remained was to focus on the pleasure of drive. This is the road I showed you at the end of episode 6, saying I would show you in the next one how much it had changed. And yes, it has changed. Just like the rest of the valley. It's been widened, hardened, electrified, and has become a frequent travel route for both hikers and cars. Also the normal ones, the standard ones you can find everywhere. No more uniqueness and inaccessibility of this area. We are currently roughly at this section, and for a change I plan to reach the Georgian military road this time via this route. The Subaru in front of me stubbornly doesn't let me overtake, even though at times it's clearly moving slower than I am. But hey, I'm in Georgia. After some time, I managed to overtake it, and when I reach the confluence of the Snotskaly River, I look for a left turn. After making the maneuver, I veer right to make room for the oncoming off-roader, and it turns out to be a good move. Thanks to a short conversation, I saved quite a bit of time because I learned the road ahead is also impassable due to snowdrifts.
Locked there with snow, so there's no way through to the. Okay. Yeah, I came there. I just needed to ask for the permission because it was just the border zone, but it was the same thing. So patched snow and no. Okay, how far is it? Okay, I'll make it easier. Thank you.
So unfortunately, I have to go back the same way again. It's a shame, because driving through this section would have been an interesting and new experience. During my brief conversation, the Subaru managed to overtake me again, and I had to drive for a moment in its dust. However, noticing a shortcut on the map that would allow me to pass it effortlessly, I quickly veered to the right. And after a few minutes, I was leaving the town of Snow in the lead. After that, it was just the Georgian military road. I talk more about it in episode 5 of this journey, so I encourage you to watch it. For now, just a few shots from this almost 120 kilometers stretch, which I covered in 2 hours and 20 minutes before reaching the town of Tianeti. While in Georgia, on July 2nd, 5 days earlier than when this footage was being filmed, I received a message on Instagram from some fellow travelers I had been in occasional contact with since early 2022, asking if I was currently in Georgia, because, as it turned out, they were too. We exchanged our current locations, and seeing the differences in our plans, we wished each other a great stay, as it didn't look like our paths would cross. How surprising it was, when leaving the town of Tianeti, I caught a glimpse of a Toyota on the left side of the road that looked just like the one owned by Coco Vintage Overland. That's Claudia and Hans on Instagram. Honestly, I wasn't entirely sure if it was really their car, because coincidence seemed almost impossible, so I decided to stop at the first convenient spot and check Instagram to see if I could really be them. Fortunately, I didn't have to drive far. As soon as I noticed an exit just after the bridge, I took it and confirmed that indeed our paths had crossed, much to our surprise. So I decided to turn around and pay them a rather unexpected visit. You won't see Claudia on this footage because at the beginning she requested that neither her image nor talks be included in my videos. It's a bit of a shame because, as you'll see later, we spent some time together and her request added a lot of work to the editing process. But since she made this request at the very beginning of our meeting, I have no choice but to respect it.
Wasn't sure if that was you. I had to stop and check your profile. That looks like this car. How are you doing, mate? You're right. Nice to meet you.
After greeting each other and expressing our mutual surprise at this situation, we went over our plans again. Since Coco had plenty of time for sightseeing and weren't aware of the road to Omalo, which was my next destination, I managed to convince them that they should join me, and with that plan, we set off. Claudia's only wish was that we first stop somewhere to cool down, so we focused on finding a suitable spot. We found it near the town of Achmeta. As we were approaching, I had the feeling for the first time that something had broken in my transfer case. I even stopped to check what was going on, but just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared. So with my heart in my throat, I continued chalking it up to some rocks or gravel hitting down the side of the car. Wishful thinking perhaps, but I stuck with it. After all, if it was a real problem, it would be happening all the time, right? The spot itself wasn't particularly scenic, but it offered a chance to cool off in the refreshing current of the river, so we decided to stay there. A local had already claimed the only shaded spot for parking, so we had no choice but to leave our cars out in the open, under the blazing sun. The road to Omalo starts from Pshaveli. As you leave the town, you'll see a sign informing you that Omalo is 72 kilometers away. Don't be fooled, as I was when I first saw it 9 years ago. The road here is of excellent quality, giving the impression that 72 kilometers under such conditions is a breeze. In theory, it can be covered in 4 to 5 hours, but in reality, everything depends on the conditions farther ahead, in the high mountain section. Just the fact that the mountain stretch is only open from June to mid-October, a maximum of 5 months, is enough to illustrate that this will be quite a challenging route. The rest of the year, the road is often closed due to heavy snowfall and avalanche risks. In fact, back in 2013, the BBC listed this road as one of the most extreme in Europe. As you've seen, the first 7 kilometers of this section from Lechuri is also undergoing transformation. The road is being widened and the surface is being leveled as much as possible. Beyond that, it looks much more like what I recorded 9 years ago. The trail narrows and only in certain spots you can notice ongoing work, mostly in areas prone to frequent landslides and erosion. In these spots, concrete reinforcements with makeshift drainage system have been installed to help keep the road passable for a bit longer than the standard bitumen surface would allow. The road widening is undoubtedly a helpful improvement. This section features sharp turns, and those extra few dozen centimeters of carved out rock make a real difference, especially for vehicles with a tighter turning radius. The serpentines you see here are just a taste of what's to come. They are located near the base of the heavy machinery used for road maintenance and rescue operations, and there are quite a few of those here. There are no official, reliable statistics on accidents along this route, but the roadside memorials commemorating those who have lost their lives serve as a grim reminder that there had been, and unfortunately still are, numerous incidents on this road. A spot like this is always a great place to capture the challenge of tackling such terrain, so taking advantage of the fact that Coco was following me in their Toyota, I decided to fly around them a bit and film their little toy navigating those narrow switchbacks. You have to admit, it's a particularly charming vehicle, and here it looked just like an RC model that big boys play with. Completely immersed in the composition and the smoothness of the shot, I didn't notice that my obstacle sensors were turned off. And well, it ended the way it ended. Luckily, I was flying low and quickly identified where the drone had gotten stuck. At first, I tried climbing up the rocks to reach it, but eventually I had to restart grabbing it from the prowler, all under Hans' watchful eye. After a successful rescue mission, it was time to assess the damage. It turned out that the propeller tips were broken. All 4 of them. I only had 2 spares, so you can imagine how thrilled I was at the prospect of losing my drone halfway through the trip, right before one of the most scenic routes. After this short break, we continued our climb. At this point, we reach a waterfall, one of the characteristic landmarks along this route. I immediately noticed that a lot has changed here as well. Back in 2015, this section of the road looked completely different. The camera was installed low to illustrate the type of surface we had to deal with, a serious challenge for a heavily loaded vehicle and for its driver as well. It was crucial to drive very slowly to avoid harsh impacts and potential damage that could occur if the car hit one of the protruding rocks with its undercarriage. Now, the road is perfectly smooth concrete, making it possible to comfortably drive here in a regular car. Back in 2015, that would have been unthinkable. As we continue gaining altitude, we begin to encounter memorials dedicated to those who lost their lives in these very spots. You would think that no one in their right mind would take on such a dangerous route while intoxicated, yet the most common cause of accidents here remain drunk driving and excessive speed. After countless turns and bumps, we finally emerge above the tree line. The views here are absolutely breathtaking. I'm grateful that the weather is on our side and that there's still enough daylight left to fully enjoy the route. We also encounter oncoming traffic from time to time, but here the drivers know the rules. Everyone stops when needed, and if necessary, both cars will wait instead of blindly driving towards each other. That was not the case when I drove into the Truso Valley, as I shown in episode 5. After making sure that the oncoming driver is indeed giving way, I continued my ascent. Since I don't have a drone, I decided to record as much as possible in 3D, so you can experience this road as if you were right here with me. Be sure to check out my Immersive Georgia series, best view with a VR headset. We are climbing higher and higher. The Albano Pass, our destination, stands at the altitude of 2,826 meters above sea level. It is the highest drivable pass in the Caucasus. The sun is setting behind the clouds, but the conditions remain nearly perfect. The road is narrow, climbing steeply, and the exposure increases, revealing the chasm below. The hairpin turns require extreme caution, especially the sharp, tight corners, which can be particularly challenging for cars with a manual transmission. In my case, it's even trickier since I only have one hand available for driving. The other is securing the gimbal, which I'm holding out of the window. That definitely makes things a bit more difficult. The road to Omalo was built in the 1970s to connect the isolated region of Tusheti with the rest of the country. Before its construction, the locals relied mainly on foot and horseback trails, which were the only link to the outside world. Along its entire length, you won't find any protective barriers, meaning you have to stay extremely cautious at all times. A single mistake here would most likely be fatal. Since 2016, discussions have been ongoing about creating a new, safer road to Tusheti, which would run through the Pankishi and Kadori valleys, reaching the Gometsari Valley in Tusheti. This route would reduce travel times from Tbilisi to just 1.5 hours. However, aside from the controversies this project has sparked among the Tushetians themselves, the Croatian company responsible for the design has yet to deliver it. So we'll probably be waiting another decade or more before it comes a reality. Meanwhile, we finally reach the Albano Pass. Given the noticeable improvements in road width and surface quality along the way, I would say this route now feels more like a challenging scenic route rather than one of the world's most dangerous roads. But back in 2015, we might have had a completely different impression. First of all, in 2015 we set off way later. Too late. Secondly, the weather was rather cloudy and humid. Thirdly, this was probably our first ever experience with a road like this, so even the very beginning left a lasting impression. You have to admit, with these kinds of drop-offs, it's easy to stay feeling a little uneasy. Fourth, Viola had a fear of heights, and her tension seemed to spread to everyone around her. I have to admit, though, that I actually found it quite amusing. The biggest factor shaping our perception of the route, however, was undoubtedly the weather. Heavy clouds clung tightly to the peaks, looking ominous, while the rain turned the road into a muddy obstacle course. Numerous streams crossed the path, carving narrow channels that we had to watch out for. It's often the case that the camera fails to capture the real challenges we face, making things seem much easier than they actually are. But from this perspective, you can tell that these conditions added an extra layer of stress. On top of that, knowing that just a few centimeters of loosely packed rocks were all that stood between us and a deadly drop, made this an experience unlike any other. And then it started getting dark. Here, most likely the friends of one of the many accident victims on this road had come to pay their respects. It is a tradition that those traveling to Tuszety often stop at the roadside memorials honoring those who tragically lost their lives, drinking alcohol in their memory. And in a way, the cycle repeats itself, because the most common causes of accidents here are alcohol and reckless driving. We, on the other hand, are driving completely sober and extremely cautiously. With every meter, our senses sharpen more and more. The reason? Visibility is becoming increasingly limited. At first, we thought it was just fog, but it turned out to be actual clouds, making driving difficult, if not outright impossible. And once again, the camera doesn't capture it the way the human eye does, but in reality our visibility was dropping into almost zero. You can only imagine what it felt like to navigate these cliffside roads under such conditions.
Wjazd na Omalo, 2600 metrów nad poziomem morza. Zrezygnowaliśmy z dalszej jazdy, stanęliśmy. Przeczekamy, bo jazda z półkami skalnymi z widocznością nawet nie metra przed maską graniczy z samobójstwem, więc czekamy, aż chmury opadną i jechać dalej.
Yes, this is exactly how Abano Pass welcomed us in 2015. And to make things even more exciting, by the end of the night, standing on this completely exposed peak, we found ourselves caught in a thunderstorm. It was right here. Now, this place looked like nothing like I remember from that trip, but that's hardly surprising. Back then I couldn't see a thing. Which means I also never saw the majestic view of the other side of Caucasus. But don't worry, I'll take you there in the next episode.